Good morning, Little Masters, and welcome back to today's Tolkien Times, a Prancing Pony podcast production. I'm the Man of the West. Thank you for joining me as I head back one last time into the rich poetry found in Tolkien's epic poem, The Lay of Leithian. Now, when we last left the story, Beren had finally managed to get a Silmaril out from the crown of Morgoth, but seemed like that her magic spell of sleep was wearing off, and they could hear the howl of Carcharoth coming from all the way to the front gate. Now, today we reach the very end of the lay as Tolkien wrote it, though far from the end of the story, and we'll go ahead and read the very short Canto 15. Up through the dark and echoing gloom as ghosts from many-tunneled tomb, up from the mountain's roots profound and the vast menace underground. Their limbs aquake with deadly fear, terror in eyes and dread in ear. Together fled they by the beat, affrighted of their flying feet. At last, before them far away, they saw a glimmer, faint and gray, of ghostly light, that shivering fell down from the yawning gates of hell. Then hope awoke, and straightway died. The doors were open, gates were wide, but on the threshold terror walked. The wolf awake there watchful stalked, and in his eyes the red fire glowered. There Carcharoth in menace towered, a waiting death, abiding doom. His jaws were gaping like a tomb, his teeth were bare, his tongue aflame. Aroused he watched that no one came, no flitting shade nor hunted shape seeking from Angband to escape. Now past that guard, what guile or might could thrust from death into the light? He heard afar their hurrying feet, he snuffed an odor strange and sweet. He smelled their coming long before they marked the waiting threat at door. His limbs he stretched and shook off sleep, then stood at gaze. With sudden leap upon them as they sped, he sprang, and his howling in the arches rang. Too swift for thought his onset came, too swift for any spell to tame, and Beren in despair then strode past Leithian to bar the road, unarmed, defenseless, to defend the elven maid until the end. He held aloft the Silmaril, and Carcharoth, one moment still, was halted, daunted and afraid. One moment only was he stayed. The right hand, thrust before his eyes, he took in sudden, swift surprise, the right, from which the radiance welled of the holy Silmaril it held. As gleam of swords in fire there flashed the fangs of Carcharoth, and crashed together like a trap that tore the hand about the wrist, and shore through brittle bone and sinew nesh, devouring the frail mortal flesh. And in that cruel mouth unclean engulfed the jewel's holy sheen. Against the wall then Beren reeled, but still with his left he sought to shield fair Leithian, who cried aloud to see his pain, and down she bowed in anguish, sinking to the ground. And after 32 First Age Fridays, we've reached the end of Tolkien's writing on this. In fact, those last 5 lines from Against the Wall, then Beren reeled, were actually found on an isolated sheet, not in the A or B texts, according to Christopher. But there is one more short passage that Christopher says was found on a separate sheet at the end of the B text, which is headed A Piece from the End of the Poem. Where the forest stream went through the wood, and silent all the stems there stood, of tall trees, moveless, hanging dark with mottled shadows on their bark, above the green and gleaming river, there came through leaves a sudden shiver, a windy whisper through the still, cool silences, and down the hill, as faint as a deep sleeper's breath, an echo came, as cold as death. Long are the paths of shadow made, where no foot's print is ever laid, over the hills, across the seas. Far, far away are the lands of ease, but the land of the lost is further yet, where the dead wait while ye forget. No moon is there, no voice, no sound of beating heart. A sigh profound once in each age, as each age dies alone is heard. Far, far it lies, the land of waiting, where the dead sit in their thoughts' shadow, by no moon lit. Christopher then compares that set of lines to the end of the prose version of the tale in the Silmarillion. But Leithian came to the halls of Mandos, which are the appointed places of the Eldalier, beyond the mansions of the west, upon the confines of the world. There those that wait sit in the shadow of their thought. The lands of ease, the land of waiting, where the dead sit. And finally, Christopher concludes, there is nothing else, and I do not think that there ever was anything else. All my father's later work on the poem was devoted to the revision of what was already in existence, and the Lay of Leithian ends here. The story, of course, does not end here, and we may spend next series or some other future series, whether it's on First Stage Fridays or Silmarillion Saturdays, finishing this story from the texts in the Silmarillion and Beren and Leithian. Folks, that is it for today's First Stage Friday, but come back next series, as I still haven't decided. More First Stage Friday or return to Fandom Fridays. Now, either way, there will eventually be more Fandom Fridays, so if you know anybody who should join me here for a future Fandom Friday, be sure to email barliman@theprancingponypodcast.com. Please visit patreon.com/Tolkien Times to learn how you can support the show, get an ad-free feed, a monthly hangout, a bonus episode every week, and more. And then join me again tomorrow on today's Tolkien Times as we wrap up this week and Series 9 with Silmarillion Saturday. Now, podcast listeners, please be sure to subscribe to the TTT in your podcast apps. For those of you watching on YouTube, please be sure to subscribe to this channel and turn on notifications. You're going to find all the PPP productions here, eventually including all of the Prancing Pony podcast episodes, both seasons of the Rings of Power wrap-up, all of this show, and my new streaming project, The PPP Plays. And be sure you're following @PrancingPonyPod on Blue Sky, Twitter, Instagram, and TikTok, and simply the Prancing Pony Podcast on Facebook. Finally, as Faramir says, go with the goodwill of all good men.